Gathering around in a circle, the smell of sage, a sacred Indigenous plant, filled the air as our host, Honey Constant Inglis, a Plains Cree archaeologist, artist, and heritage educator from Sturgeon Lake First Nation, initiated the smudging ceremony. I quietly waited my turn. As the smoke drifted in front of me, filling my nose, I guided it to cover my eyes and ears. I then moved the smoke in a circular motion over my head, from front to back, and finally placed it on my heart. Setting intentions, I prayed for peace and clarity and welcomed goodness into my life. What I described is called smudging. Smudging holds deep significance. It's a spiritual ceremony practiced by many Indigenous peoples around the world, including First Nations, Inuit, and Métis in Canada. It provides protection, blessing, and thought to purify the body and soul, and also clear the mind. This was just one of the many immersive cultural experiences I had during my 10-day road trip across Canada. You're listening to part 1 of a 2-part series exploring Indigenous history, culture, and attractions across the Canadian provinces of Saskatchewan and Manitoba. In Saskatchewan, we'll explore Indigenous art, visit the home of Canada's longest-running archaeological dig, enjoy a delicious meal foraged from the prairies, and journey back in time to learn about the 19th century Métis community that built and defended their home along the South Saskatchewan River. I'm Danielle Desir-Corbett, and you're listening to the Thought Card Podcast. Beyond visiting popular Canadian cities like Toronto, Montreal, and Quebec, before this 10-day road trip, there was so much of Canada I hadn't seen yet. There was so much I wasn't aware of, including the struggles, triumphs, beliefs, and way of life of the Indigenous communities who have called present-day Canada home for thousands of years. I am grateful for the opportunity to learn, connect with, and celebrate the traditions and customs of the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities. This episode is made possible with the support of Tourism Saskatchewan and Discover Saskatoon. Financially savvy travelers, we are in for a treat. Visit my blog at thoughtcard.com to read along and see all the visuals. Now we have a lot to discuss here, so let's go ahead and jump in. Welcome to the Thought Card, a podcast about travel and money, where planning, saving, and creativity leads to affording travel, building wealth, and paying off debt. We are the Financially Savvy Travelers. Nicknamed the Land of Living Skies, Saskatchewan is a sight to see with prairies in the south and deep forests and crystal clear lakes in the north. If you're like me, a first-time visitor, let me tell you, the open landscape and golden fields stretching as far as the eyes can see are absolutely breathtaking. I've never seen anything quite like it, so please do not forget to pack your camera. With a constant horizon that stretches for miles, they say you can see a dog running away for 3 days straight. Yes, my friends, it's that flat. Saskatchewan is an agricultural hub and gets the most sunshine of any Canadian province. The nation's breadbasket, Saskatchewan is a major wheat, lentils, and canola producer. A side note, driving by the bright highlighter yellow canola fields on a hot summer day is a mesmerizing experience. Just as you would look out at the blue ocean, you may also feel a sense of endlessness here. Indigenous people have lived in Saskatchewan for millennia. The province is home to various Indigenous nations, including Plains Cree, Nakota, Dakota, Métis, and more. Their connection to the land is spiritual and practical as they've developed hunting, fishing, and agriculture practices to sustain their communities. While exploring Saskatchewan, I connected deeply with the Indigenous culture, experiencing the art, history, and cuisine at 3 cultural attractions. Approximately 15 minutes from downtown Saskatoon, Wanuskewin Heritage Park has been a gathering place for over 6,400 years. Today, it's an archaeological site and cultural and heritage center where you can learn about the history, culture, and customs of the Northern Plains Indigenous people. Wanuskewin links the past to the present through interactive exhibits, art galleries, performances, demonstrations, and culturally immersive events like the Hanwi Moon Dinner, which celebrates Indigenous ingredients, cuisine, and culture. Days before dinner, the renowned Métis chef Jenny Lessard from Capel, near Regina, foraged and harvested ingredients from the region, such as stinging nettle, which she used to create the puree for our bison tenderloin. We started the evening with a smudging ceremony and a walkthrough of the exhibits. Since it was thundering and lightning outside, we skipped walking the grounds and trails. There are many miracles and unexplainable events or coincidences at Wanuskewin. The impromptu thunderstorm may have been one of them. Interestingly enough, though, the skies cleared up right in time for dinner. The long row of tables was set beautifully, seating over a dozen people for an intimate multi-course dinner out in nature. Chef Jenny Lessard welcomed us to the teepee village and explained the significance of the ingredients and cooking techniques used. Surrounded by prairie wilderness and not too far from an ancient bison jump, our first course consisted of a garden salad, Lakota squash puree, charred corn, and heirloom beans topped with juniper vinaigrette. Chef Jenny put so much creativity into her culinary creations. Although I do not eat meat, my friends raved about the bison tenderloin seasoned with yarrow, sage. They said it's one of the best bison dishes they've had. For dessert, the traditional berry stew with birched whipped cream made my heart soar. It was perfectly balanced, not too sweet. With our bellies full, it dawned on me that Hanwi Moon Dinner was more than a culinary experience. While food was an important part, there's more to it. We just had dinner on ancestral land where diverse Indigenous communities historically hunted bison and may have broken bread here for thousands of years. I am now part of Wanuskewin's long and ever-evolving history. Next, we returned to the visitor center where we enjoyed a nonverbal dance performance and sat down with Dr. Ernest G. Walker, chief archaeologist and Wanuskewin's co-founder. He shared how the park started, what it was like finding artifacts from 40 years of excavations, from arrowheads to pottery, bison bones, petroglyphs, and more. Curious about the future, I asked Dr. Ernest G. Walker if he anticipates resuming archaeological excavations and also what sparked his interest in preserving the Great Plains. Take a listen to what he said.
I was born in Saskatoon, so I am a son of the Great Plains. And as a kid, I was just wandering around collecting arrowheads and bits of shell and bones. And I never, I guess, grew up and got away from my childhood pursuits. And I coupled that with medical training. So I was doing different things, but it kept coming back how much I love the Great Plains. It's the largest biome, the largest ecological area in North America, but the most fragile one. And it has been misused over the years. We've plowed most of it up, and then in the dirty 30s, a lot of it blew away. There's been a lot of mining, and with no restoration. It looks fragile, and people say nobody lives there, so you can do whatever you want. No, that's not it. And of course, now we find out recently that the Great Plains are a major factor in carbon sequestration, which relates to global warming. And all of a sudden now there's a new interest in preserving it. So for me, it's a love affair. That's what it is. You can't turn your back on a love affair. There's no thought of launching large-scale excavations anymore. There may be some smaller things that we need to do if there's erosion or something like that. The reason is, I'm almost embarrassed to say that we've done 40 years of excavation here. The reason for that was that we needed to maintain momentum in the community while we were trying to raise money. We needed money to do this. So, I mean, that was an obvious one. It is a little redundant. We've been excavating bison jumps and campsites and things. There's not a lot new or really drastically exciting that you would expect to find. We pretty much got a lot of that.
Wanuskewin is in the process of becoming a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which would make it the first in Saskatchewan. However, it's a long process and has faced its share of challenges. Most UNESCO World Heritage Sites, either natural or cultural, have structures. Think the pyramids of Egypt and the Acropolis in Greece.
The powers that be, they like built structures. They like pyramids and walls and cathedrals. And when you're dealing with migratory bison hunters, they don't leave much of a mark on the environment and they're gone, right? And so people would say there's nothing there. So we have to overcome that, the thinking about what the Great Plains are. So there's that. And I know we're going to be successful, and we will continue to talk about archaeology, Indigenous culture history, and bison and grasslands and all of those things that are so iconic about the plains. But I think getting the UNESCO designation is more than that. It's obviously going to have great benefits for the city of Saskatoon because it's basically going to be in the city someday fairly soon. I think it will have a big impact for the province of Saskatchewan. There is something here of value in this province. And as it turns out, something of enormous value given everything else that I've told you. So it's almost a culture change event, I hope, for the province. We've got some work to do there, but a game changer, I hope. And that's why I think having people all across the country that are rooting for Wanuskewin to become a World Heritage Site, even though it's not their province, says something about this epic Canadian story, how it came to be. And so here we are.
At Wanuskewin, you'll learn that bison are a keystone species of the grasslands. They affect every species in the ecosystem. Bisons were used for food, clothing, tools, and more. Home to millions of bison, by the late 1800s, they were nearly extinct due to overhunting. Their disappearance negatively impacted Indigenous communities. However, with great effort, a herd of genetically pure bison was reintroduced to the Wanuskewin Park in 2019, their original prairie home. Visitors of Wanuskewin can get up close and personal with bison during a guided bison walk and learn about the critical relationship between the bison, the grassland ecosystem, and the Northern Plains Indigenous people. An hour north of Saskatoon, we visited Batoche National Historic Site, an important location in Canadian history, especially for the Métis people. The land at Batoche is known as the heart of the Métis Nation. Once the home of a thriving Métis community, Métis people lived on river lots on the banks of the South Saskatchewan River before the Northwest Rebellion of 1885. You might be wondering, what is a river lot? Well, river lots are long stretches of land providing water access for farming. To give you some background, the Métis are an Indigenous people of Canada with mixed First Nations and European ancestry, mainly French and Scottish. Distinct from their ancestors, they formed their own communities, spoke their own language called Michif, and developed a unique culture that blended the two cultures and traditions. At Batoche, journey back to the 19th century as you explore the East Village and the Saint-Antoine de Padoue church built in 1883, the spiritual center for this community. By the way, the Métis practice Roman Catholicism. Inside Saint-Antoine de Padoue church, it's adorned with statues, images, and candles. Saint Antoine, or Saint Anthony, is the patron saint of lost things or people, which resonated with the Métis, who were facing challenges and struggles. In the late 1800s, things got heated when European settlers and the Canadian government started encroaching on traditional Métis land. Racial tensions and oppression led to the Northwest Rebellion of 1885. Led by Louis Riel, the leader of the Métis Nation and founder of Manitoba, the rebellion lasted 4 days and ended with the defeat of the Métis. Today, you can see bullet holes which pierce the restored rectory facade. Batoche is a historical place where sad things happened. Although there was a lot of loss, the Métis people did not lose hope. A community of Métis lived here before, during, and after the battle. Batoche symbolizes Métis resilience and cultural preservation. Visiting Batoche helped me understand the early tensions between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people in the 1800s and future implications. While Batoche is a fantastic destination for history buffs, it also caters to outdoor enthusiasts. Wanting to enjoy the scenery, we hiked the nature trails, hugging the riverbanks, ending the tour with vista views from various cliff viewpoints. These are the same trails Métis people would have used to get from one place to another and gather as a family to pick berries and hunt. Driving back to Saskatoon, I noticed the Métis flag flying proudly throughout the region. It features the infinity symbol, symbolizing the blending of two cultures. In Saskatoon, we visited the Rémy Modern, which houses 8,000 modern and contemporary art pieces. Admission is free, so donate what you can. Here, you'll see that Indigenous culture and art aren't a relic of the past, but alive and thriving. Indigenous culture is vibrant and expressive. One of the pieces that stood out to me is by Ruth Cuthand, a Canadian Saskatoon-based artist of Plains Cree, Scottish, and Irish ancestry. Cuthand's art often examines First Nations living conditions, settler-native relationships, and Indigenous people's health. At Rémy Modern, Brainscan Series, a collaborative exhibition with Cuthand's son, Theo, brings awareness to the mental health crisis in Indigenous communities and Canada's larger population. Adopting the traditional craft of beading, Cuthand uses glow-in-the-dark beads to depict MRI scans of individuals with various mental health issues, from ADHD to anxiety, depression, and schizophrenia. While the beads are colorful and beautiful, they made me think about disease and how it impacts individuals, families, and communities in a whole new way. The museum and its discontents by Métis realist painter David Garneau is another piece that stood out to me. Addressing the concept of decolonizing museums, it depicts human beings and objects in bubble wrap, calling out that museums often protect human remains and cultural knowledge, but don't care for the communities whose works are displayed. Before heading out, reconnect with the land by stepping outside and spending time at the outdoor medicine wheel garden. The Indigenous medicine teachings was created to decolonize urban spaces and pass down traditional Indigenous knowledge to future generations. You'll see that it's divided into 4 quadrants that holds the 4 sacred medicines used in ceremonies: tobacco, cedar, sage, and sweetgrass. Visiting Rémy Modern opened my eyes to the perspective of Indigenous artists, their lived experiences, what they care about, and the societal issues that matter to them. My dear listeners, we've only scratched the surface. Saskatchewan offers so many incredible Indigenous cultural attractions and immersive experiences. People from all over the world are visiting Saskatchewan to learn about Indigenous culture, explore their roots, and understand Canadian history, as well as the significance of reconciliation. Honestly, during my trip, I was introduced to difficult subjects and dark truths, which I knew little about. But with an open mind and heart, I observed, I listened, and I learned. That's the beauty of travel. Indigenous people in Saskatchewan and across Canada have stories to tell. I'm grateful for all those who shared their lived experiences, art, food creations, stories, and traditional knowledge with me, which I can now share with you, and you will share with others. I want to hear from you, financially savvy travelers. Have you visited Saskatchewan or the city of Saskatoon? If so, what are some of your favorite things to do? What cultural experiences are you adding to your wish list? Please share your thoughts with me by either leaving a comment on Spotify or on my blog at thoughtcard.com. Thank you to Dr. Ernest G. Walker for joining us as our special guest in Tourism Saskatchewan and Discover Saskatoon. As always, I encourage you to experience Saskatchewan for yourself. Make Saskatchewan your next vacation destination. And you can plan your trip by checking out tourismsaskatchewan.com for things to do all year round, places to see, travel guides, maps, events, and festivals. Visit discoversaskatoon.com to learn about restaurants, things to do, and all that's happening in the city of Saskatoon. You can find all the links mentioned in the episode description and the accompanying blog post. And with that, financially savvy travelers, I will see you next time as we explore Manitoba, Canada.